She thought she was prepared for anything on the Texas frontier until the night a wounded Comanche appeared in her barn, setting off a chain of events that would force her to choose between loyalty to her own people and a bond she never expected. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The year was 1872, and the Texas frontier remained a place of uneasy tension. Sarah Mitchell stood on the porch of her family's modest homestead, watching dust devils dance across the parched landscape. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age. The death of her parents to fever 2 winters ago had left her alone to manage their small ranch with only the occasional help of neighboring settlers. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the plains. Sarah tucked a stray strand of auburn hair behind her ear and sighed deeply. The drought had been merciless this season, and water was becoming scarce. She would need to make another trip to the creek tomorrow. Miss Mitchell. The voice startled her from her thoughts. Turning, she spotted young Billy Thompson riding hard toward the house, his horse kicking up clouds of dust. "Billy, what's wrong?" Sarah called out, her heart quickening at the urgency in the boy's approach. The 12-year-old pulled his horse to a stop, his freckled face flushed with exertion. "Raiders, Miss Mitchell. Comanche raiders hit the Watson place last night. Mr. Watson's dead, and they took Mrs. Watson and their daughter." Sarah's blood ran cold. The fragile peace that had settled over the region in recent months had been shattered. "Where's the army? Have they been notified?" "Captain Reynolds and his men rode out at dawn," Billy replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Pau says you should come stay with us until they're caught. It ain't safe for a woman alone out here." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I appreciate the offer, Billy, but I can't abandon the livestock. Tell your father I'm grateful, but I'll be fine. I have my father's rifle." After the boy reluctantly departed, Sarah moved with purpose through the house, checking the locks on doors and windows. She loaded her father's Winchester and placed it within easy reach of her bed. Sleep would not come easily tonight. As darkness settled over the land, Sarah sat by the window, watching and listening. The night sounds of the prairie usually brought her comfort, but tonight every distant howl and rustle set her nerves on edge. Eventually, exhaustion overtook vigilance, and she drifted into a fitful sleep in the chair. The sound of hoofbeats in the yard jolted her awake. Dawn was still hours away, the moon casting silver light across the floorboards. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she reached for the rifle. Moving silently to the window, she peered through a gap in the curtains. A lone rider had dismounted near the barn. In the moonlight, she could make out the distinctive silhouette of a Comanche warrior. He moved with a pronounced limp, one hand pressed to his side. He was injured. Sarah raised the rifle, finger poised near the trigger. But something made her hesitate. The warrior wasn't moving toward the house. Instead, he was leading his horse into the barn, his movements speaking of exhaustion and pain rather than menace. "What are you doing, Sarah?" she whispered to herself. Common sense told her to barricade the door and wait for daylight. But curiosity and something else, something she couldn't quite name, pushed her toward a different choice. Gripping the rifle tightly, Sarah slipped out the back door and moved quietly toward the barn. She had to know what this wounded Comanche was doing on her property. If he was a scout for a larger raiding party, the entire settlement could be in danger. The barn door stood slightly ajar. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever she might find within. With the rifle ready, she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The wounded warrior had collapsed in a pile of hay. His horse stood nearby, still saddled and breathing heavily. The Comanche's eyes snapped open at her entrance, alert despite his obvious pain. In the dim light filtering through the barn slats, their eyes met, his dark and wary, hers wide with fear and determination. For a long, tense moment, neither moved. Then the warrior spoke, his voice strained but clear. "I mean no harm to you," he said in accented but understandable English. "I only seek shelter for the night." Sarah kept the rifle trained on him. "You're a long way from your people. she said, working to keep her voice steady. A grimace that might have been a smile crossed his face. "As are you, woman of the white eyes." Blood darkened the side of his buckskin shirt. Whatever wound he carried was serious. Sarah knew she should turn him out or hold him at gunpoint until help could arrive. Instead, she found herself asking, "Are you alone?" The warrior nodded once. "I am called Taka. I am alone." Sarah kept the rifle aimed steadily at the wounded Comanche, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Every story she'd ever heard about settler women captured by raiders flashed through her mind. Yet the man before her appeared in no condition to pose a threat. "You're bleeding," she stated flatly, noting the growing dark stain on his buckskin shirt. Taka's gaze remained fixed on her, his expression revealing nothing. "Soldiers," he replied simply. "3 days ago, army men shot you?" Sarah asked, her grip on the rifle loosening slightly. "Bluecoats chase. I am not with those who took the white women." His words were carefully chosen, as if he understood her unspoken fears. "Different band, different people." Sarah hesitated. The Comanche tribes were not a single entity. She knew this from conversations with her father, who had managed to maintain relatively peaceful relations with some of the local bands before his death. Still, trust did not come easily on the frontier. "Why come here?" she demanded. Taka's eyes flickered to his wound. "Need water, need rest, then go." Making a decision she wasn't entirely certain was wise, Sarah lowered the rifle slightly. "I'll bring water and bandages. Try anything, and I'll shoot you where you lie." A hint of what might have been respect showed in his eyes. "You have warrior spirit. I will not harm you." Sarah backed out of the barn, never fully turning her back on him. Once inside the house, she gathered clean cloths, a bottle of whiskey her father had kept for medicinal purposes, and a pail of water. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, questioning her own judgment with every passing moment. When she returned to the barn, Taka had not moved from his position in the hay. His horse whickered softly as she approached. Up close, she could see that the Comanche was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps no more than a few years older than her own 22 years. "Remove your shirt," she instructed, setting down her supplies. With slow, painful movements, Taka pulled the bloodied garment away from his torso, revealing a deep bullet wound in his side. The injury had been crudely bound with strips of leather, but infection was setting in. "This needs cleaning," Sarah said, wetting a cloth. "It will hurt. Pain is nothing new," he replied stoically. As she worked to clean the wound, Sarah maintained a careful distance. "How did you end up alone? Where is your band?" Taka's jaw tightened as she applied the whiskey to his wound. "My people moved north. I stayed to find my brother. He was taken by Texas Rangers 2 moons ago." The revelation surprised her. "You speak English well. Mission school, 3 winters as a boy." "Before I escaped." His dark eyes met hers. "You are alone also. No man protects this place?" Sarah stiffened. "I protect this place. My parents are dead." A new understanding seemed to pass between them, 2 souls alone in a harsh land. As she finished bandaging his wound, the sound of approaching horses reached them from outside. Taka tensed immediately, his hand moving to the knife at his waist. "Stay here," Sarah whispered urgently. "And stay quiet." Emerging from the barn, she was confronted by Captain Reynolds and 3 of his cavalrymen. The officer's usual stern expression was even more severe than normal. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted her with a tip of his hat. "We're tracking a Comanche warrior who was spotted heading this direction. You haven't seen anything unusual, have you?" Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She thought of the wounded man in her barn, a member of the tribe that had killed and kidnapped her neighbors. By all logic, she should turn him over immediately. Yet something held her back. "No, Captain. I've been here alone all night." Reynolds studied her face. "We found blood signs about a mile back. He's wounded, which makes him all the more dangerous. These savages are most deadly when cornered." "I'll keep my rifle close," Sarah assured him. "How goes the search for Mrs. Watson and her daughter?" "No sign yet," Reynolds replied grimly. But we won't rest until they're recovered and every last one of those murderers is dealt with. He surveyed the property. Mind if we check your outbuildings, just to be thorough? Sarah's mouth went dry. The house is unlocked if you'd like to look inside. I was just checking on the horses in the barn, all quiet there. For a tense moment, she thought Reynolds might insist on inspecting the barn anyway. Instead, he nodded. We'll continue on then. Lock your doors tonight, Miss Mitchell. If you see anything, fire 3 shots in the air. We'll have patrols in the area. As the soldiers rode away, Sarah remained rooted in place, shocked by her own deception. When she finally returned to the barn, Taka was sitting upright, knife in hand. Why did you not tell them? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. Sarah wasn't sure she understood her own actions. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe because you said you weren't with the raiders. Or maybe I'm just a fool. Not fool, Taka said softly. Woman with good heart. Rare thing in this land of blood. As night deepened around the small homestead, Sarah found herself seated on a bale of hay across from the wounded Comanche, an oil lamp casting long shadows against the barn walls. Whatever madness had compelled her to hide him from the soldiers, she was now committed to this dangerous path. They'll come back, she said finally. You can't stay here beyond tomorrow. Taka nodded. At dawn, I will go. Where? The army is scouring every inch of this territory. There are places they do not know, he replied. Places only my people can find. Sarah studied him curiously. Why search for your brother alone? Isn't that the way of your people to raid together? A flash of anger crossed Tefal's features. You know nothing of my people. We are not all raiders. Some wish only to live in the old ways, hunting buffalo, following the seasons. Yet some of your tribe took Mrs. Watson and her daughter, Sarah countered. And some of your people burned Comanche villages, he responded evenly. Killed women, children. Which is the greater crime? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. Sarah felt the weight of histories she had never fully understood pressing down upon this moment, upon this strange connection forming between two people who, by all rights, should be enemies. Morning light filtered through the barn slats, waking Sarah with a start. She hadn't intended to fall asleep, but exhaustion had finally claimed her sometime in the early hours. She quickly realized she was alone. Taka's space in the hay was empty. Rising stiffly, she looked around the barn. The Comanche's horse was gone as well. Relief and an unexpected disappointment mingled in her chest. He had slipped away as promised, sparing her any further complicity in hiding him. But as she pushed open the barn door, she froze. Taka stood at the water pump, bare-chested and washing himself. His bandaged torso glistened with water in the early sunlight. He turned at the sound of the door, his dark eyes meeting hers. You should not be out in the open, Sarah hissed, quickly scanning the horizon for any sign of riders. Need water for journey, he explained, pulling his cleaned buckskin shirt back over his head. Wounds must be clean or fever comes. Sarah hurried to him, grasping his arm. Come back inside. Captain Reynolds could return at any moment. As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Panic flashed across Sarah's face. Quickly, back to the barn. But Taka shook his head, pointing to the horizon. Not soldiers. Different riders. Sarah squinted against the morning sun. 3 men on horseback were approaching from the east, not wearing the blue uniforms of the cavalry. As they drew closer, her stomach knotted with recognition. Cochrane's men, she whispered. Seth Cochrane owned the largest ranch in the territory and had been pressuring smaller homesteaders to sell their land for months. His methods had grown increasingly intimidating. You know these men? Taka asked, noting her reaction. They work for a man who wants my land, Sarah replied tersely. Go back to the barn, now. This time, Taka complied, but not before retrieving something from his horse's saddlebag, a revolver that he tucked into his waistband beneath his shirt. Sarah squared her shoulders and walked to the edge of the yard as the riders approached. She recognized Eli Parker, Cochrane's foreman, leading the group. Miss Mitchell, Parker called out with a false friendliness that didn't reach his eyes. "Fine morning. What brings you to my property, Mr. Parker?" Sarah asked coldly. Parker dismounted, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. He was a tall man with a weather-beaten face and cold blue eyes that had never inspired trust. "Mr. Cochran heard about the Comanche raid on the Watson place," he said, removing his hat in a mockery of politeness. "He's concerned about your safety out here all alone." "How thoughtful," Sarah replied. "Please tell him I'm managing just fine." Parker stepped closer, invading her space. "Thing is, Miss Mitchell, these raids are likely to continue. Army can't be everywhere at once." His voice dropped. "Mr. Cochran's renewed his offer to buy your land. Given the circumstances, he's even willing to add another $50 to his price." "My answer hasn't changed, Mr. Parker. This land isn't for sale." The false pleasantness dropped from Parker's face. "Being stubborn isn't wise, Miss Mitchell. Pretty woman like you shouldn't take chances, especially with savages about." One of the other men had wandered toward the barn, peering inside. Sarah's heart raced. "I believe our business is concluded," she said firmly. "Please leave my property." Parker's eyes narrowed. "You know, it's curious. Captain Reynolds mentioned he stopped by here yesterday evening, tracking a wounded Indian." He studied her face carefully. "Said you hadn't seen anything unusual." "That's right," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "Yet Jake here says there's fresh blood in your barn." Parker gestured to the man who had been inspecting the outbuilding. "And what looks like someone's been sleeping in the hay." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I treated an injured calf last night. Lost it, unfortunately." Parker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is that so? Mind if we have a look around?" Before Sarah could respond, the barn door swung open and Taka emerged, revolver in hand. "She asked you to leave," he said, his voice steady despite his wounded state. The reaction was immediate. All three men reached for their weapons, but Taka already had his aimed. "Slowly," he warned as they began to draw. Parker's face contorted with rage. "Well, well, harboring a savage, Miss Mitchell. That's a hanging offense in these parts." "He's injured and poses no threat," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. "He'll be gone by midday." "Oh, he'll be gone all right," Parker sneered. "Strung up from that oak tree yonder. Once the boys at the settlement hear about this." Taka's finger tightened on the trigger. "You will leave now, or one of you dies." The standoff stretched for several agonizing seconds. Finally, Parker gave a slight nod to his men. "We're going." "But this isn't over, Miss Mitchell, not by a long shot." As the men mounted their horses, Parker fixed Sarah with a cold stare. "Cochran will hear about your Indian friend, as will Captain Reynolds." His gaze shifted to Taka. "Enjoy your last hours, Comanche. They're coming to an end real soon." After the men rode away, Sarah turned to Taka, panic rising in her chest. "You have to leave immediately. They'll be back with others." Taka lowered the revolver. "They will harm you for helping me." "I'll manage," Sarah insisted, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Harboring a Comanche warrior during active hostilities would indeed be viewed as treason by many in the territory. "Come with me," Taka said suddenly. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "What? They will punish you, perhaps kill you." "Come with me to the hidden places." "You're asking me to abandon my home? To go with you to your people?" Sarah shook her head incredulously. "They would kill me on sight." "Not all Comanche are the same," Taka replied. "My band, the Quahati, we have not fought against the settlers this season. Our chief, Quanah, seeks a different path." The name struck a chord of recognition. Sarah had heard of Quanah, the half-white, half-Comanche leader who was said to be more moderate than other war chiefs. "I can't just leave," she protested, though with less conviction. "This land is all I have left of my parents." "Land means nothing if you are dead," Taka stated bluntly. As the reality of her situation sank in, Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she had built, everything she had fought to maintain after her parents' death, was about to be lost, all because she had chosen compassion over caution in helping this wounded warrior. How long would I stay with your people? She asked, the question surprising even herself. Until it is safe. Until the soldiers find the real raiders and the anger passes. Sarah looked around at the homestead, the house her father had built with his own hands, the fields they had cultivated together, the memories embedded in every board and beam. Was she really considering abandoning it all? I need to gather some things, she said finally, her decision forming even as the words left her mouth. We'll need supplies for the journey. As she hurried to the house, Sarah felt as though she were moving through a dream. She packed quickly clothing, her mother's locket, a small Bible, basic provisions. The practical part of her mind screamed that she was making a terrible mistake. But another voice, one that sounded strangely like her father's, reminded her that sometimes survival required impossible choices. When she returned to the barn, Taka had saddled both his horse and her mare. His face showed surprise at her small bundle of possessions. You truly come? He asked. I have no choice, Sarah replied. Those men will return with others before nightfall. Even if I explained that you forced me to help you, Parker wouldn't let the opportunity pass to seize my land for Cochrane. Taka nodded, understanding the politics of territory better than she had expected. We ride west, he said, then north when we reach the canyon lands. There are paths the white men do not know. As they mounted their horses, Sarah cast one last glance at the homestead. A lump formed in her throat as she realized she might never see it again. My father always said a home is more than just the land it stands on, she murmured, almost to herself. It's the people who share it. Taka's expression softened slightly. Wise words. My people say the same. With that simple acknowledgement of shared wisdom across their divided cultures, they rode away from the homestead, two unlikely companions thrust together by circumstance and choice, heading toward an uncertain future in the vast wilderness beyond. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as Sarah and Taka rode westward. They traveled in silence for much of the morning, both lost in their own thoughts. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly, and Sarah was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat she had thought to bring. By midday, they reached a series of rocky outcroppings where Taka signaled they would rest. His wound was clearly causing him pain, though he made no complaint. As they dismounted in the shadow of a large boulder, Sarah noticed fresh blood seeping through his bandage. You've reopened your wound, she observed, retrieving the spare bandages she had packed. Taka nodded grimly. The ride is difficult. Let me change the dressing, Sarah insisted, her practical nature taking over despite the strangeness of their situation. As she worked, Sarah felt Taka's eyes studying her face. Why did you help me? He asked suddenly. When soldiers came. Sarah's hands paused momentarily. It was a question she had asked herself repeatedly since making the fateful decision to hide him. My father taught me to judge people by their actions, not by what others say about them, she replied carefully. You had the chance to harm me when I found you in the barn. You didn't. Taka considered this. Your father sounds like a man of honor. He was, Sarah said, a hint of sadness coloring her voice. He believed there could be peace between our peoples. He traded fairly with a Comanche band that passed through our lands each spring. She finished securing the fresh bandage. He said understanding comes before peace. Your father was unusual for a white man, Taka remarked. Sarah smiled faintly. Yes, he was. She corked the water skin and packed away the remaining bandages. What about your family? You mentioned searching for your brother. A shadow passed over Taka's face. My brother Nokoni was taken during a hunting party. Texas Rangers attacked without warning. His voice hardened. They said he stole cattle. It was not true. I'm sorry, Sarah said, and meant it. The injustice of frontier justice was something she had witnessed firsthand. My mother waits with our band, Taka continued after a moment. She grows old, wants to see both sons before she joins the ancestors. The personal connection humanized him further in Sarah's eyes. She had grown up hearing stories that portrayed the Comanche as one-dimensional savages. Yet here was a man searching for his brother, concerned for his aging mother, motivations any person could understand. As they prepared to continue their journey, the distant sound of hoofbeats echoed through the rocky terrain. Taka immediately tensed, motioning for Sarah to remain silent as he crept to the edge of their sheltered position. After a moment, he returned, his expression grave. "Soldiers," he whispered. "8 riders. Coming this way." Sarah's heart raced. "Captain Reynolds?" Taka nodded. "They follow our trail." "We need to move," Sarah urged, gathering their supplies. "Too late," Taka replied. "Horses need rest. We would not outrun them." His dark eyes met hers. "You should go to them. Tell them I forced you to come. They will believe you." The suggestion startled her. "And leave you to be captured or killed?" "No." Surprise flickered across Taka's face at her refusal. "Why risk yourself for me?" Sarah wasn't entirely sure of the answer herself. Something had changed during their brief time together. A recognition of shared humanity that transcended the artificial boundaries of race and allegiance. "Because it wouldn't be right," she said simply. "And because I believe what my father believed, that understanding comes before peace. Someone has to take the first step." A moment of silent communication passed between them. Then Taka nodded once, decision made. "There is another way. Dangerous but possible." He led her deeper into the rocks to a narrow crevice almost invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. "This leads to a hidden canyon. The path is difficult for horses, but they can make it if we lead them." The passage was treacherous, a winding trail that descended steeply through the rock face. They had to proceed single file, leading their nervous horses carefully over the loose shale. Sarah's hands were soon scraped raw from steadying herself against the rough stone walls, but she pressed on without complaint. The path eventually opened into a breathtaking hidden canyon. A small stream trickled through its center, feeding a cluster of cottonwood trees. The natural enclosure was invisible from above, protected by the overhanging rock formations. "We will be safe here," Taka said as they reached level ground. "Soldiers will not find this place." As they watered their horses at the stream, Sarah gazed around in wonder. "How did you know this was here?" "These lands belonged to my people long before white men came," Taka replied. "Every canyon, every stream has a story. My grandfather showed me this place when I was a boy." They made camp beneath the cottonwoods, and as evening approached, the temperature dropped rapidly. Sarah huddled in her blanket, watching as Taka built a small, nearly smokeless fire. "Will your people accept me?" she asked as darkness settled over the canyon. "A white woman arriving with a lone warrior, won't they be suspicious?" Taka fed another small branch to the fire. "There will be questions. But Kwana's mother was a white woman taken in raid. He understands both worlds." "Taken in a raid?" Sarah repeated, tension returning to her shoulders. Sensing her renewed fear, Taka met her eyes across the fire. She chose to stay. "Became Comanche in her heart. Became my chief's mother by choice." "And you think that's what will happen to me?" Sarah challenged. "No," Taka replied honestly. "You are not captive. When it is safe, I will bring you back to your land if that is your wish." The sincere promise eased Sarah's concerns somewhat. They sat in companionable silence as the stars appeared overhead, brilliant and unobscured by artificial light. "Tomorrow we will reach my people," Taka said eventually. "Tonight we should rest." As Sarah settled onto her blanket, exhaustion from the day's journey overtaking her, a strange sense of peace washed over her. Despite the uncertainty of her future, despite the danger that had forced her from her home, she felt as though she had taken a step towards something important, perhaps the very understanding her father had valued so highly. Morning brought a new clarity. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary of the hidden canyon, Sarah found herself studying Taka with fresh eyes. In just 2 days, he had transformed in her perception from a feared enemy to a complex individual with his own history, values, and sense of honor. "What will you do after you find your brother?" she asked as they saddled the horses. Taka paused, seeming surprised by the question. "Continue the ways of my people. Hunt. Follow the seasons." He secured a saddle strap before adding, "But the old ways are ending. The buffalo grow fewer. The white man's world pushes closer each season. My father believed people could adapt without losing what matters most, Sarah offered. He said change doesn't have to mean surrender. A ghost of a smile touched Taka's lips. Your father and Quanah would have understood each other well. As they mounted their horses and prepared to leave the canyon, Sarah took one last look at the peaceful haven. Whatever awaited her among Taka's people, whatever the future held for both of them, she knew that something fundamental had shifted in her understanding of the world. The journey had begun with fear and desperation, a wounded warrior and a woman with nowhere else to turn. But as they rode side by side toward the northern horizon, Sarah recognized that they had created something unexpected amid the chaos of the frontier, a fragile bridge of trust between two worlds long divided by suspicion and bloodshed. My people have a saying, Taka spoke, breaking the contemplative silence as they emerged from the canyon into the open plains. The longest journey begins with hands reaching across a divide. Sarah nodded, understanding the wisdom in those words. My father would have said that courage isn't about fighting battles. It's about taking the harder path when it would be easier to follow the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, acknowledgement passing between them of the unusual bond they had formed, a bond that defied the bitter divisions of their time. Whatever challenges awaited them among the Quahati, whatever judgment might come from both their peoples, they had already accomplished something remarkable simply by choosing understanding over fear. As they rode north, Sarah felt both trepidation and hope intermingling in her heart. The homestead she had fought so hard to preserve was behind her now, perhaps lost forever. But ahead lay something she hadn't expected to find in the midst of frontier conflict, a chance to see beyond the boundaries that divided people, to glimpse a world where differences could be bridges rather than barriers. And for now, that possibility seemed worth the journey into the unknown.